Mad Sports Radio. This is the Sports Sit Down with Mike Damergis.
Mike Damergis back here on the Iona College Radio Hour, and we're wrapping things up with the Sports Sit Down. And, of course, we have the editor-in-chief of Baseball Digest, an adjunct professor in the sports communication and graduate program here at Iona College, Mr. Rick Cerrone. Rick, thank you so much for joining the Iona College Radio Hour here.
Hi, Mike. Good to be with you, as always.
Well, let's start things off with the news about Tom Seaver, Hall of Fame pitcher, and it's announced that he has dementia. And just the timing of this 50 years after the Mets won that incredible World Series in 1969 against the Orioles.
Well, it's just a very sad story. It's not really a surprise to me because I had been somewhat monitoring Tom through people I knew. I know there's been a documentary that is being done on him that Ed Burns, the director, is directing, the actor and director, and Bill Madden is involved in that. I've gotten the idea over the last couple of years that he was not doing well. But it's really sad, and it's sad for not just Tom, who's still, thank God, still with us, but, so many people from that team have passed. When you look at, Don Clendenin and Tommy Agee and Tug McGraw, and it's hard to believe, for me to believe, that 50 years has gone by since that absolutely incredible moment or season in 1969.
And talk about Tom Seaver. I mean, he won 3 Cy Young Awards during his span, 5 20-win seasons. And you're talking about a time when guys like Juan Marichal, Steve Carlton, and Bob Gibson were in the National League.
It's funny when you see people from other eras, you watch highlights of them. You only see the things that they did well. You didn't see the 7 times that they made an out or whatever. But I've got to tell you, Mike, I can honestly look back and I really never remember seeing Tom Seaver get knocked around or pitch a bad game. I know it happened, and I heard Art Shamsky do a radio interview this week, and that's what he was saying, that he always kept you in the game. He never 5 runs in the first and he's out of there in the second or third. Again, I'm sure it's going to happen. Don't everybody go looking at the record books, but he was such a competitor, and he was in an era of great pitchers. And then remember, because of guys like Seaver and more so Gibson, McClain, they lowered the mound. It was 1969 was the year of the pitcher, or 1968 was the year of the pitcher, and then they lowered the mound.
And we're talking with Rick Cerrone, the editor-in-chief of Baseball Digest, and you're doing your spring training tour, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes here. Also, adjunct professor in the sports communication and media graduate program here at Iona College. And Tom Seaver, the big trade, of course, that shocked New York, shocked the baseball world. Could you imagine if we had the internet back on June 15th, 1977? It was known as the Midnight Massacre. Pat Zachary traded from the Reds, Steve Henderson, Doug Flynn, Dan Norman to the New York Mets for the great Tom Seaver, and that really shocked the baseball world and Mets fans, of course. I don't think they've gotten over that till this day.
Well, certainly Met fans haven't, and again, what was it? 6 years later, they made another, or more than 6 years later, they made another tremendous, maybe even worse faux pas. When back in the day, if you lost a free agent, there was a draft, and teams had to protect a certain amount of players, and I guess going into the 83 season, I want to say, maybe 84, the Mets did not protect Tom Seaver, thinking the White Sox, who had the draft pick, would not select someone making that money and at that age, but they sure did, and the Mets lost Seaver. And I remember they had a press conference in the Diamond Club with Tom Seaver after they lost him. And, man, you talk about bad things happening 2 times, but that was really inexcusable. And then, of course, Seaver went on to win his 300th game. Would have been with the Mets, but no, it was with the Chicago White Sox. So, and again, you go back to 1977 and what big news it was. It was such a different era, and I guess being the age I am now, I prefer it when everybody weighs in now. It's like, you had to get the daily news. You had to listen to, Art Rust on the radio at night. Now it's just look at your phone. It's a very different world now. And that was a really difficult time for the Mets. His relationship with the owner, M. Donald Grant, had deteriorated to the point where, they just basically. I didn't think it was a horrible trade for the Mets at the time because of the talent they got back. A lot of those young guys, Steve Henderson and Dan Norman, Doug Flynn, were highly touted players, and some of them, had pretty good careers. But what a terrible thing for the Mets to do it twice. That's the real thing that people forget. They lost him twice.
Yeah, and if he would have stuck with him in 83, 84, and 85 through that, he would have been really the mentor of those young pitchers. Ron Darling, Dwight Gooden coming up, and who knows, he might have had another chance at a World Series in 86 if he was able to stay around. And ironically, too, he gets his 300th win as a member of the White Sox at Yankee Stadium, too, as well.
I was there with Commissioner Peter Uberoff. We went to the game, I guess, because it was going to be Seaver's 300th game. And I will tell you something that nobody really knows, that he was then the cover the following day of Sports Illustrated. But the cover got scrapped because the NFL, I guess the NFL went on strike or something like that. But there is there are images of the Sports Illustrated cover because I have one.
Wow.
And I have it signed by Tom Seaver.
Oh, my goodness. You got something that doesn't exist.
Seaver winning his 300th game. I also want to say, and maybe I'm wrong, that was Phil Rizzuto Day. I don't know why I equate the two. It was obviously 30.
You know what? I think you're right about that.
And I remember being down there with Commissioner Uberoff and watching Phil Rizzuto get knocked over
by the cow. And the funny thing is, Tom Seaver and Phil Rizzuto were teamed up as broadcasting mates, and it was an odd pair. Phil Rizzuto in New York and Tom Seaver, a guy from Southern California, and there was great chemistry between the two. And I remember Rizzuto, Seaver.
And one thing I remember, and I'm so grateful for that, my first year with the Yankees as their director of media relations, it was actually Rizzuto's last year as a broadcaster. So I got to enjoy Phil being around, popping his head in my office because my office was right behind the broadcast booth, and he'd walk through the offices and he'd hey Cerrone, and the whole. But he was what a great character and a great person Phil Rizzuto was.
And Rizzuto gained some fame to a new generation of fans with Seinfeld because he was he wasn't featured, but they talked about him on an episode of Seinfeld as well.
Yeah, he did the play-by-play of in the background. And this morning, as I was in my car running a few errands, I heard Phil Rizzuto on Paradise by the Dashboard Light.
The Meatloaf song.
The Meatloaf song. And Phil claims that he was appalled when he found out. And I'm like, Phil, what did you think you were doing? When he rounds third, it looks like he's going to make it.
A play at the plate. He's going to make it.
It's funny that a couple of years ago at a company outing, we did karaoke, and the song that me and a young lady that worked there got was "Paradise" by the Dashboard Light, and I just kind of walk through the thing, but people were really surprised when it got to the moment that Phil jumps in with the play-by-play. I picked it up and didn't miss a beat. So
holy cow, I think he's going to make it.
Okay, we got a real pressure cooker going here.
That's great. He is Rick Cerrone, the editor-in-chief of Baseball Digest. And if you want to pick up a copy, order a copy. Just Google Baseball Digest, and you can have it sent to you. You also have the option of having both. It's sent to you, the hard copy, and the online edition as well. And, Rick, you're doing a great job. I know the buzz around baseball, they're excited to have it back and up and running. And hopefully this thing has legs, and let's keep it alive, because Baseball Digest, I remember as a teenager and a teenager getting that Baseball Digest, and now it's a little different. It's packaged differently than it used to be, correct?
Yeah, it's a full-size, full-color magazine that now comes out 6 times a year. And if you're interested, go to baseballdigest.com. It'll tell you all about it. You can subscribe there. And, one last thing that you mentioned, Mike, about Tom Seaver. Tom Seaver was our very first Player of the Year, and that was 50 years ago. So this year, 2019, will be the 50th anniversary Player of the Year for Baseball Digest. We're looking forward to that.
Rick, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike.